in my mind, healing is a journey, not a destination. And what helps me is each time I do have an opportunity to speak in front of an audience, people come up afterwards. I've had people throw themselves on me crying that they were so glad that somebody gave them an opportunity to share their secret.
Well, hello and welcome to Uncorking Your Story. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and today I'm excited to introduce you to Babs Walters, whose memoir, Facing the Jaguar, just came out today. Congratulations on your launch day, Babs. During the course of our conversation, she said something that really stayed with me, and that's this: healing is a journey, not a destination. Now, that sentiment resonates deeply with me, and it's one that I explore in my own book, The Waiting Room, which looks at how grief, family, and unresolved emotions shape us. It's a novel inspired by personal loss, but it's ultimately about finding meaning in the midst of heartache. Now, if you're drawn to stories that make space for healing and hope, I hope you'll check it out. It's available wherever books are sold. Now, back to Babs. What moved me most wasn't just her story of surviving trauma and breaking cycles. It was what happened since she started sharing it. Now, after speaking events, people have come up to her in tears saying, "Thank you. I finally feel seen." Now that's the power of a story well told. So with that, let's pop the cork on Babs Walters' unforgettable journey. As a domestic violence and sexual abuse survivor, author, advocate, speaker, survivor Babs Walters has devoted much of her adult life to raising understanding and awareness of the long-term effects of generational trauma, breaking the chain. She has conducted trainings for the past 30 years on women's empowerment, sexual harassment and discrimination, helping women speak up and out for themselves. She joins me today on Uncorking a Story to discuss her new memoir, Facing the Jaguar, a memoir of courage and confrontation. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Babs.
Thank you so much for having me here, Mike.
I'm excited to have you here, Babs. I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
Well, I think that my story probably starts the same place that most authors' stories start. I was an avid reader as a child. And what I loved most about the books that I read was the way I felt that the author was speaking directly to me. So I would get lost in my books. My mother would be standing over me saying something, and I would see her lips moving, but I wouldn't even hear a word coming out of her mouth. And my childhood was not, I guess you would say it was not an average childhood. So part of that escape was very pleasurable to me, in addition to getting lost in the books. And one year, my grandfather gave me as a gift a portable typewriter. And that's what started me on my actual physical journey. But my career in human resources and executive coaching had me developing and delivering a lot of corporate training. So I did mostly, I guess you would call it, technical writing in those days. And that's what started me a few years ago. After I sort of left corporate America, I wrote a business book to help me capture everything that I had tried to teach managers and executives. And it was called Your Employees Did What? It was 7 strategies for driving workplace performance. And I used it as a calling card to get clients when I went into my own business. But this book here is the first attempt that I've had at publishing my story.
So for that first book, I'm curious, did you use that typewriter your grandfather gave you?
No. As a matter of fact, I went from that portable typewriter, which was so wonderful to be able to carry around, to an electric typewriter. Wow, that was huge. To a word processor. And now look at us. You could sit in the palm of your hand. You can write a book if you wanted to.
You know, I often wonder how our writing would be different if we were forced to write on a good old-fashioned typewriter instead of using a computer, word processor, that kind of thing. If how much more intention we'd put into our writing if we didn't have the old backspace.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because there are times when I would write longhand just because I didn't have a device near me. So you could always find a scrap of paper someplace. But one time I actually sat down and tried to write like a whole chapter longhand. And boy, that was painful. I couldn't wait to get back to my keyboard.
I can only imagine the feelings of carpal tunnel that would come in. One of my favorite authors is Daniel Silva, and he's known for writing all of his novels longhand on legal pads, like while lying down on the floor of his office. I don't know if that's true, but I did hear him say that at one point in time.
Well, it might be true because that might be his inspiration. If you get your first idea that way and then it works, you start thinking, well, this is my lucky charm. I'm going to keep doing it.
That's right. That's right. It's like the sports star who won't change, his socks, after a win, which could be a little stinky. But tell me, what's the genesis behind this book? It sounds like it deals with some pretty heavy themes, Babs. So what can you share with us about Facing the Jaguar?
Well, my story started with my parents, who were two troubled kids and got together in a reform school. And somehow, while they were housed on two separate campuses, they managed to get pregnant and needed to run away because in New York, they couldn't get married underage. And when they ran away, I came too quickly. They were not able to get married yet at that point, and my father got drafted into the war. So you had this child raising a child. You had this other kid who was just fresh out of a reform school for anger management issues, who was trained to be a sniper in the Army and to kill with one shot. And when he finally comes home after a year and a half of service, he finds my mother with another man. So that became their dance. And they stayed married for 72 years. So it's kind of interesting story. But it was not a great way to raise children, between one running away and one always angry. And one of the things that I probably love my mother the most for is she introduced me to books. My mother was an avid reader. She would come, I don't think I ever saw her cook or clean the house, but she would sit with a pile of books all day, all night. And she brought me books from the library. And of course, in those days, we had a bookmobile. So one day when I was reading encyclopedias, because I had nothing else in the house to read, I came across a term that described something that was happening to me. And it was right after the Incas of Peru and incense, and it was the term incest. And when I read what I thought the experts who write encyclopedias had to say about my life, I don't think I've ever felt more alone in my entire life. And I made a decision that day at 11 years old that someday I would write a book, and the book would help some other little girl not feel so all alone. Now, you're probably wondering why it took me so long to get here and keep my promise, right? I actually tried to write it in my 40s, and I took a class at NYU, with a novel writing course. And while I had the criteria to get accepted into the course, the professor pulled me aside one day and he said, "You need to go home." And I was in shock because here I was finally getting my words out, And he said, "Even war and peace has some peace in it. No one is ever going to want to read this book until you go home and you get better." So that just really pushed me forward in my healing journey. And I told a story now that I would not have been able to tell then.
Yeah, I'm curious, like back in your 40s, when you originally were thinking about this, when you're doing the NYU thing, was your intent behind that book different in your 40s than it was later on in life?
Wow, that's interesting. I'd have to say yes, although I've never really defined what it was. At that point, I was writing a novel, so I was trying to hide some parts of what happened to protect people because they were alive at that point. And because I thought that writing a novel meant that I could be more creative in the storytelling.
Okay. So you mentioned that too, that it was a novel versus a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
But I know sometimes, when things are, sometimes with writing, our intentions might be to get back or revenge or, maybe make a hit piece on somebody. And that's real. That's a real emotion,
Of course.
but it's not always the greatest motivation for for writing, whereas it sounds like you wanted to really, in round two anyway, you really wanted to help other people with it, and that became the intent.
Correct.
So I'm curious, how difficult was this to write? I mean, taking this trip down memory lane. I mean, you opened up this conversation by saying your childhood was not the average, and it sounds like just by what little you've shared so far that certainly it wasn't average in any sense of the imagination. How difficult was it to go back and kind of re-experience some of these things as you're writing them down?
And not as difficult as you would imagine, because 45 years of therapy has brought me a consciousness that I tried to suppress as a child, that I actually had disassociated from because it was so horrible. But it was difficult for me to portray people as objectively as I could, and that made it tough. I think that one of the best comments that someone who reviewed the book wrote, that I tell the story without pointing fingers or without blaming anyone, and I try to tell it as objectively as I can because I want it to make a difference. I don't want it to be, oh, there's this bitter person and she's complaining.
Yeah. How healing was it for you? I mean, it sounds like 45 years of therapy. I'm sure there's some healing involved there. But the act of writing and processing and sharing your story, I imagine there's some healing there as well, although I don't want to assume. But I'm curious if you could just speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, that's been a big surprise to me, Mike. So that's really a good question, because I didn't expect, and everybody says, oh, writing a memoir is so cathartic. But what happened is I took a writing course, and I had two fabulous mentors taking that course. And one of them told me that in order for people to want to read my book, I need to have some universal truth in it, that not everybody is going to share my experience or even be interested. This is a subject that a lot of people just don't even want to talk about. And she encouraged me and supported me to look for what was universally true in my story. And what I came up with was the fact that all families have secrets that they keep. They don't have to be anything like mine at all, but it's the things that don't get discussed at the dinner table, like adoption or suicide or a relative in a mental institution or bankruptcy or so many topics. So I started to think about the harm in keeping secrets and the fact that my parents, in order to behave the way that they did, had to have been in the same place at some point, that there was some generational trauma that they had experienced and they were unable to let go of, and they could not break that chain. So I did as much research as I could about every detail that they had both told me about their lives. And I was able to find things that were absolutely amazing and gave me the opportunity to see my parents with a little bit more grace. And that was healing, because you can't be angry at other people and not hold some of that anger inside yourself someplace.
Yeah, that anger can be debilitating, and it will manifest itself in sickness and mental health issues, physical health issues, that kind of stuff. So that's a beautiful thing that you're able to sort of almost forgive them in a way, but it's forgiveness through understanding.
Right. I wouldn't go as far as saying forgiveness, because I believe that there's still more work to be done. In my mind, healing is a journey, not a destination. And what helps me is each time I do have an opportunity to speak in front of an audience, people come up afterwards. I've had people throw themselves on me crying that they were so glad that somebody gave them an opportunity to share their secret. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to heal the rest of the world. I'm still working on healing myself. But I do think that if my parents were not mine, I could see them completely differently than I did growing up. So I have years of this history. And today I can say to you, I look at them and I say, I got something that they didn't have. I broke the chain.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful, being the breaker of chains, if you will. I love that notion that healing being a journey, not a destination. I think a lot of people think, particularly those who go into treatment, to therapy, I just want to get better, and this will end at some point. But it sounds like there's no finish line to it.
Well, I gave myself a nickname. I am a self-help junkie, Mike. So I love anything that I can find that creates a bigger awareness for me so I can think of life differently. I've been working on like reframing things for years now. And um, I always thought that, well, if you get a cut, you put a Band-Aid on it and then the cut is gone, it heals. Or if you have a cold, the cold goes away. But there are certain things that go deeper than that. And I've subsequently learned about CPTSD, which is a little bit different than veterans returning from war experience. This is a continuous amount of trauma that doesn't seem to end. And that's in your cellular memory. I still get triggered. My husband loves to joke. He's a big teaser. And there are times that I can't believe that he's seriously trying to be funny. I think he's serious. There's an element of truth in his humor, and that's the piece that I hold on to. Now, I know that I can work on that area. If I make it important enough, I can spend some time and heal that. But I don't think that I'm ever going to be the child that I would have been if this didn't happen to me. But it did, and in some ways, it's been a benefit too.
Yeah, that's the silver lining there. It's like it's something happening for you and not to you, which is kind of a different way. Easier for an outsider to say that than maybe for someone to realize it. But I have seen that in my own life when something that's objectively tragic happens. If you're able to look back and say, okay, well, what did I learn from that? What did I come away with? My brother passed away a couple of years ago. And it was horrible. I mean, he was 57. He had a very young family,
Wow.
Died of something that he should not have died from because he died of lung cancer, was never a smoker, one of those odd situations. And, what I walked away from after processing it for a while, it took me a while to really see this, but it was one of the greatest lessons of love I ever saw. Just the love that he and his wife, my sister-in-law, shared, the love around him.
Well,
It was, I mean, so that was something that was really objectively horrible, but it taught me so much. And I was able to take away something very positive and beneficial from it.
well, you really gathered a lot from that one experience because I like to say it's not what happened to us. It's what we do with what happened to us.
Yeah.
And I've always been taught that it's my responsibility to repair the world. And the world is just too messed up for me right now. So I'm just concentrating on my corner of it, Mike. And you learned a big lesson there from your brother. And it's a tribute to him and to you that you can share that. And maybe there's something more you might want to do with it.
Well, you never know, Babs. You never know. But you mentioned just mentioned that you took it upon yourself or thought you had to take it upon yourself to heal the world. And I'm thinking to myself, that is a tremendous weight to put on your shoulders. I'm thinking of Atlas.
Right. Well, I do have my jazzercise shoulders. Yeah, it's not meant as a responsibility. It's meant as a community. That we're not here by ourselves. And I remember early on being taught this cliche, but you can give a man a fish and you can feed him for the night, or you can teach a man to fish and you can feed him for life. So maybe my corporate training has something to do with the fact that if I've learned something, I want to share it. If I have walked through darkness and I now have a light, why shouldn't I shine it so that you can see your way out of it too?
Yeah. In some ways, I think that's what we're all kind of called to do somehow, is to take our talents and these things that that we're good at and share them with others for the benefit of a larger community. So I think that's beautiful. The only unfortunate thing, and I've heard that expression before about the man and the fish. If you gave me a fish, I just wouldn't eat it because I do not eat fish, and it's something that drives my wife insane. But I would probably starve. I'd be the guy who would be wasting away while other people are having fillet of sole or whatever it is that somebody caught them.
No, you take your knife out and you go find yourself some meat.
That's right. That's right. Arr! I'd probably act all manly in some way. So writing the book, talk to me a little bit about sort of your path towards publishing here. A lot of writers listen to this show, and my goal is always to inspire them, not just with the stories behind the stories, but I like what I like to focus on,
right,
but the process and how you go from idea to manuscript to being able to pick it up on the shelf.
Well, I have to say that every step that I took was guided. So I saw somebody that I had heard of who wrote a memoir, and I asked her how she got started. And she told me I took this 6-month course called How to Write Your Memoir in 6 Months. It sounds ridiculous, right? But I signed up for it. It's a course. I'm going to learn something. I mentioned to you before that I had 2 really great mentors, the one that helped me find the universal truth. But the other one said to me, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but I was just 80 this week. So
happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm giving birth to the book on the week of my birthday. But she said to me, no one will read a book of an 80-year-old unknown person if they're going to tell the story of 80 years. So we need to find where your story starts and ends and where you can get your message out without telling the whole story. So we did a coming of age, and we actually ended my story at a certain point of confrontation with my father when I was in my 20s. And so the rest of the story was about the research that I did and how I validated what my parents had told me. So without these 2 mentors, without finding this universal truth, without knowing how to find the theme in my story, the through threads, I would not have been able to be sitting here with you today. Yeah. So if people are looking for advice, I certainly could recommend the course. And anybody who wants to get in touch with me, I would be glad to forward them to the publishers as well.
Well, the other thing that sort of jumps out to me just by that response is, there is a notion that writing is a solitary thing, and it can be. Oftentimes we do write alone. I mean, I know I write alone, but it's very collaborative though, because once you start working with a mentor or an editor or an agent or whoever it is you work with, there is a collaboration. And I'm curious, how did you find your mentors? Was it through the course or somewhere else?
Well, it started through the course. Part of joining this particular 6-month program was to have an accountability partner. And we were asked to define the level of accountability we wanted. Do we want just a light accountability, a medium level accountability, or a very high level accountability? And I wanted high level. We needed to produce 2,500 words each time we submitted our work. And I knew I needed to have my feet held to the fire because I have a life. And, there are things that get in the way. So that started the community. And then one of the mentors is a publisher. And she and I spoke, and she had suggested that she publish my memoir. So in order to become part of that program, she has 35 authors that are all being published summer 2025. And she introduced us all to each other. And we formed cohorts depending upon whether we were novelists or memoirists or graphic novels or historical novels or whatever type of book, self-help books we were writing. And through that journey, through this year long working with these other authors and learning from each other and meeting each other in person, even though we live in different places in the US, we have plenty of support. We're a sharing section for each other.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. And I know the work that your particular publisher produces is top quality. I have had the benefit of interviewing a lot of She Writes Press authors on this show, and you are all a top-notch bunch. I will say that.
Thank you. And we have a great distribution system now. We're being distributed by Simon and Schuster, so that opens up our the places where our books can be found.
That's right. How did you come up with the title?
I didn't, but I have to tell you, I thought I had a great title. My original title was Sorry, Sis, This Story Has to Be Told. But that's because my sister, who had the same experience as I did, does not want the world to know. The publisher had decided that there was actually a theme in my story, and she called it a through thread. I didn't know anything. I thought you write a memoir, you just talk about your life. The through thread was the Jaguar. And once she pointed it out to me and I saw how many times the Jaguar showed up in my story, I went along with her on the choice of the title.
Tell me more about this Jaguar. How does it show up in the story?
Well, if you recall, I told you before that I had disassociated a great deal from what was happening in my childhood. And in order to survive, I couldn't be thinking about what was happening to me, especially after I tried to tell a few people and no one was able to help me. So that just kept shutting me down more and more. And I recalled that when my father would come into my room at night and pay me those nightly visits, that I squeezed my eyes shut so tightly that all I saw was black. And in that blackness, I felt myself being chased by a jaguar through the jungle. And as long as I kept running, somehow, eventually, the jaguar would come to an end and I could wake up.
Wow. Now the title makes sense. I mean, that metaphor of sort of facing the jaguar, is that your subconscious at play? I mean, it sounds like it's coming through as a through line in the book, but I'm curious, is that, I mean, I'm guessing it's a gift from the universe that it was able to come through like that on the page.
Well, I actually have a connection, and it's really a horrible connection because years ago, when I was a child, books could be discriminating and racist, but I don't know if they could still do that anymore, children's books. But I had read a book, a golden book called Little Black Sambo. Now, you're way too young to know this. But the thing about Little Black Sambo is he kept getting chased by tigers who liked his fancy clothes. He was an Indian child and he had these really beautiful, colorful clothing. And every time the tiger chased him, he would give up another piece of clothing, his vest, his pants, his shoes. So maybe you can see the symbolism on my nightly visits a little bit. But eventually what happened is he had no clothing left and the tiger came after him again. So he decided to run around this tree. I don't know how long he ran around the tree, but eventually he ran around the tree so long that the tiger melted into butter and he was able to put it on his pancakes and eat it. It was a stupid story.
That is, I mean, that does not sound delicious.
That was someplace inside me, So,
wow.
yeah, it was subconscious, but a number of the vignettes in my memoir are dreams. I have had very vivid dreams. I did a lucid dreaming course once so that I could capture some of them. And that was just the biggest dream, facing the jaguar.
Wow. Powerful, powerful story. And it sounds like your cries for help were not heard, or they were heard but not listened to.
Well, one of my therapists told me, Mike, that this is a very messy topic and people avoid it because they don't want to get into the mess. So it's not a clear cut, clean, let's make this not happen anymore and fix it. It's very complicated. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure I blame them, but the help was not available then.
Yeah, but that's a mess that has, shockwaves of repercussions throughout your entire life, I'm sure.
Well, that's why I feel it's extra important now. I say that I've reached a point in my life where I'm very blessed. I have good health. I have a loving partner. I have 12 grandchildren. I dance and I write. I have nothing bad in my life. So I want to take this rest of my life and I want to use it to give meaning and purpose to what happened to me. Otherwise, it was senseless. So if I can help somebody else, if I can inspire or motivate or encourage, I was looking at the word encourage. It's really about having courage. And when you encourage someone, you give them courage to do what they need to do. So I've got plenty of courage here that I want to give away. And I'm hoping that I get to meet the people who need to hear it.
Well, it sounds like you are. If you're going to speaking events and people are crying as they throw themselves at you, you're helping other people feel seen, which is a beautiful thing. So I have a question for you. Behind I think it's your right shoulder, there's a picture on the wall.
Yes.
I am curious as to what I've been staring at it since we've started talking. Is there a story behind that picture?
I'm sitting in my husband's office because he's sitting in my office right now. I face the water and the sun. So my office is so bright that it would look like I had a halo around me. And he has the shady office. This is something from National Geographic magazine. It's a very famous, I think Steve Curry was the photographer. This woman has the most amazing eyes. There's a light shining on it right now, so I don't know how much you can see of it. But I don't have the story. You'd have to interview him for the story.
Well,
but I also
good.
have Jackie Robinson, and I have a whole bunch of other things around that he really likes.
I'm curious. I always like to throw a couple of pop culture questions at people as we wrap up as a way of getting to know my guests a little bit more. And I'm curious, Babs. It sounds like you were a very avid reader when you were younger, but I'm wondering, television. Did you have anything that you liked to watch on TV when you were growing up?
We didn't have a TV. We had radio, but we didn't have a TV. I lived in very low income housing projects. We didn't have much of anything, and we moved around a lot because we were always in trouble. But so there wasn't a lot of opportunity for, to have accessories. We did have 9 gun racks. Does that count?
Well, that's another form of entertainment that I have not discussed on the program yet. But there's a first time for everything.
Well, actually, I said that it came out of my mouth too fast. We had 9 guns. We had gun racks, but we didn't have 9. You were able to put more than one gun, and they were open racks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, well, you mentioned your father was a sniper, right?
Mm-hmm.
So was this World War II, I'm imagining? Or?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. All right. What about these days? Do you have a favorite go-to medium for relaxation other than books? I'm assuming you're still an avid reader, but do you like movies, TV, anything like that?
Yes, my husband and I watch TV every night. Every night. That's what we use to unwind and relax. And we try to choose things that we can discuss, things that open up other topics for us. But of course, I'm still a Sex and the City girl. I mean, I lived in Manhattan with him when we first met, and after we got married. And there's no place like Manhattan. So I tried a little Emily in Paris to see what that was all about.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's with Phil Collins' daughter, I think.
Yes.
Lily Collins. Yeah. Did you enjoy that?
Yes. But I have to say the reason I enjoyed it is her boss is a 61-year-old woman who's quite a knockout. Yes. And I need all the inspiration I can get.
If you could go back in time and whisper some words of advice to your younger self, Seer, maybe it is to that girl who is, dreaming about, running and being chased while some terrible things are going on. What would you tell your younger self? How would you reassure your younger self?
Wow. part of what started me on my healing journey was exactly that question. I had joined a group of young mothers when my first child was in nursery school. And the woman who was leading the group asked everybody to write a letter to their 5-year-old self and tell them what would be happening in the future in their lives. And the other women all read their stories about parties and proms and summer camp and college away. And I hadn't read mine. So the leader said it by the end, I think you should read yours. And of course, when I did, it was like a bomb went off in the room. The only thing that I could say to her is that there's something special inside you, and don't let the fact that nobody else seems to be having the same life that you are having deter you from being true to that piece of yourself.
Beautiful, beautiful and reassuring. Babs, I know that Facing the Jaguar is out. Where can people pick up a copy?
It's available wherever books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore, even your public library.
Ooh, let's not forget those public libraries. They
That's
serve
right.
a very important role in our community. And Babs, if people want to get in touch with you, do you have a website or social media that you're active on?
Yes, my website is real easy to find, babswalters.com. I have a YouTube channel at Facing the Jaguar. And my Instagram is at walters.babs. My actual birth name is Barbara Walters. So that's part of a problem when you're trying to establish yourself. And the other Barbara Walters shows up like in the first 20 pages of any search that you're going to do. So it's the same Walters, but Babs.
Well, not a terrible person to be associated with.
That's
although
right.
I could see where search results would be a problem.
Well, she once cashed one of my paychecks. I had written an article for the New York Times, and she was in their accounting department a little bit longer than I was, and they sent her my check.
Oh, the nerve. Did you get it back?
No, they just paid a second check. They said she didn't even know. She said she had a team of finance people. She never knew she got the check.
Well, that's a good story. That's a great fun fact, or a two truths and a lie that you could use as an icebreaker.
Yes.
Babs, thank you so much for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.